6 a.m. In Portland feels less like morning and more like a bruise. The sky was the color of wet concrete. Pressing down on the roof of my 15-year-old sedan, inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and stale fries. I was curled in the driver's seat, my knees jammed against the steering wheel, trying to find warmth beneath a coat that hadn't been dry since November. A sharp rap on the window shattered the silence. I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. Disoriented, I fumbled to wipe the condensation from the glass. The world outside was a blur of gray rain and green shadows. But then, a face came into focus. Stern, weather-beaten, familiar. It was my grandfather, Frank. He was standing in the pouring rain, water dripping from the brim of his hat, staring directly at me. Behind him, looming through the mist, was the Victorian cottage. The house he had given me, the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. Its windows glowed with warm, golden light, a cruel contrast to the cold metal box I was living in. He didn't look angry, he looked broken. He leaned down, his eyes locking onto mine through the glass, and asked the question that would finally shatter everything. The house I gave you, didn't you like it? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand how I ended up freezing in a sedan outside my own property, you have to understand the architecture of my family. In the blueprints of my parents' lives, my sister Olivia was the grand facade, the marble columns, the sweeping staircase, the thing designed to be seen and admired. I was the structural support, essential, weight-bearing, and entirely invisible behind the drywall. My name is Jasmine, and for 24 years, I built a career on being unseen. As a junior landscape architect, I designed gardens for high-end estate sanctuaries where wealthy people could sip wine and feel peaceful. I knew soil pH, drainage gradients, and shadow patterns. I knew how to make things beautiful without ever stepping into the frame. My sister Olivia was the opposite. At 30, her entire existence was a performance. She was a lifestyle curator, a job title that seemed to involve taking photos of avocado toast and complaining about lighting. To the internet, she was a guru of domestic bliss. To our family, she was a deity. Our parents, Jeffrey and Cynthia, didn't just love Olivia, they invested in her. She was their retirement plan, their social currency. They funded her curated life with a monthly allowance of $3,360. That money covered her rent in a trendy loft, her organic grocery delivery, and the endless stream of props she needed for content creation. Meanwhile, I paid the utility bills. I covered the property taxes when my dad forgot. I bought the groceries that my mom cooked for Olivia's surprise visits. I was the safety net they walked on to applaud her tightrope act. The dynamic was absolute. Olivia was the asset, I was the liability insurance. My needs were considered overhead costs annoying, necessary, and ideally minimized. But my grandfather, Frank, saw the cracks in the foundation. He was a man who built a landscaping empire with calloused hands and a stubborn refusal to cut corners. He didn't care about Instagram followers or brand aesthetics. He cared about roots. He watched quietly as I balanced the family ledger, both emotionally and financially. He saw me fixing the leaky faucet while Olivia filmed a day-in-the-life video in the living room. 3 months ago, on my 24th birthday, Frank drove his battered truck up to our driveway. He bypassed the main house where my parents were likely retouching photos of Olivia and walked straight to me in the garden. He handed me a heavy iron key and a deed box. Inside was the title to our late grandmother's Victorian cottage in the historic district. It wasn't just a house. It was a legend in our family. It had original stained glass, a wraparound porch, and most importantly, a detached, historic greenhouse in the backyard. My grandmother's sanctuary, my dream. "It's yours, Jasmine," Frank had said, his voice gravelly with emotion. The house, the land, the greenhouse, all of it. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. This was freedom. This was a way out. "But Grandpa," I whispered, looking toward the main house where my parents were laughing at something Olivia said. They won't like this. Frank's eyes hardened. I don't care what they like. I care about what's right. This house needs someone who understands how to nurture things, not just display them. It needs you. He leaned in closer, his expression serious. Listen to me, Jasmine. This is yours. Don't let them take it. Don't let them guilt you. This is your legacy. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I felt valuable. I held the key tight, imagining the quiet mornings in the greenhouse, the safety of walls that belonged only to me. I thought the war was won. I was wrong. The war hadn't even started. The moment Frank's truck disappeared down the road, the siege began. There was no shouting, no broken plates, just a suffocating blanket of reason and concern, woven by three people who were experts at making selfishness sound like sacrifice. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the deed box still open in front of me, when my mother, Cynthia, walked in. She didn't look angry. She looked pitying. "Oh, Jasmine," she sighed, pouring herself a glass of wine. "He shouldn't have done that to you. Put that kind of burden on your shoulders. He's getting old, honey. He doesn't understand what a money pit a historic property is." "I can handle it," I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I wanted. "With what money?" My father, Jeffrey, chimed in, leaning against the counter. "You barely cover your rent. The property taxes alone on a place like that. You'll be drowning in 6 months." Then came Olivia. She didn't argue about finances. She went for the jugular. She sat down across from me, her eyes wide and brimming with tears that I knew she could summon on command. "Jas," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "You know I've been looking for a studio space for years. My brand is finally taking off. This house, the aesthetic, the lighting, it's exactly what I need to secure that sponsorship with the Lifestyle Network. But it's mine," I said, pulling my hand away. "Grandpa gave it to me." "And what are you going to do with it?" Olivia asked, her voice hardening just a fraction. "Hide in it?" "That greenhouse is rotting, Jasmine. I can turn it into something amazing, a content creation hub. It would launch our family to the next level." "Our family?" I repeated. My mother gasped. "Jasmine, how can you be so selfish? Your sister is the public face of this family. Her success lifts us all up. You're single. You don't need 3 bedrooms and a garden. It's wasteful." They didn't stop. For days, it was a relentless campaign. They framed my ownership as a theft from the family's potential. They called my desire for a home greed and Olivia's desire for a studio destiny. "It's just a building to you," my father said one night, shaking his head. "To Olivia, it's a career. It's her future. How can you deny her that?" I started to crack. Not because their arguments made sense, but because the noise was unbearable. I had spent my life making myself small to fit into the cracks of their world. Taking up space felt wrong. It felt dangerous. "I just want peace," I thought, staring at the ceiling in the dark. "If I give them the house, they'll stop. They'll be happy. And maybe, for once, I'll be the good daughter." I didn't realize then that peace bought with submission isn't peace. It's just a quieter form of captivity. 2 weeks later, worn down and desperate for the silence to return, I signed the transfer papers. I handed Olivia the heavy iron key. "You're doing the right thing," my mother said, beaming. "We're so proud of you." It was the first time they had said those words to me in years, and it cost me everything. The day I moved out was efficient. My parents had hired professional movers to pack my life into boxes, not to help me, but to clear the space for Olivia's rebrand as quickly as possible. I handed over the keys to the main house and the greenhouse, feeling like I was handing over my own ribs. "Don't look so tragic," my father said, patting my shoulder. "We've got it all sorted. You can stay in our old basement apartment downtown. It's fully paid for until the end of the year. Consider it a thank you." I drove to the apartment, numb. It was a basement unit in a building my father owned. It was dark, damp, and smelled of old pipes, but it was shelter. I unloaded my boxes, trying to ignore the water stains on the ceiling. "This is fine," I told myself. "I can start over." 2 days later, I came home from work to find my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I jiggled it. Nothing. I tried again, panic rising in my throat. The door was solid, unyielding. I knocked. No answer. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail. My father didn't even pick up. Finally, I called the building manager, a man named Pete, who had known me since I was a kid. Pete, it's Jasmine. I think my key is broken. There was a long pause on the other end. Jasmine, your dad told me you moved out. He said to change the locks and list the unit. It's already rented. New tenant moves in tomorrow. The ground seemed to tilt. What? No. He said I could stay here. He promised. I'm sorry, kid. He was very specific. Said you found a better place. I stood on the sidewalk, the rain starting to fall, clutching my work bag. I had nowhere to go. My savings were drained 3 months ago when Olivia had a branding emergency that required $5,000 for a website launch, money I had loaned and never seen again. I didn't have enough for a deposit. I didn't have enough for a hotel. I walked back to my car. My 15-year-old sedan with the leaky sunroof. I unlocked the door and sat in the driver's seat. Just for tonight, I thought. Just until I figure this out. That night stretched into a week. The week stretched into a month. Then 2. Then 5. Winter in Portland is a relentless, gray assault. It's not the cold that breaks you. It's the damp. Everything I owned grew a layer of mold. My clothes smelled like mildew. I learned to park in different neighborhoods to avoid police, to wash my hair in public library bathrooms, to eat cold food because I had no way to heat anything up. But the worst part wasn't the physical misery. It was where I parked. Every night, drawn by a masochistic need to see the truth, I drove to the historic district. I parked down the street from the Victorian cottage. My cottage. I watched the golden light spill from the windows. I saw Olivia hosting dinner parties, her laughter ringing out as guests arrived with wine bottles. I saw my parents carrying in bags of high-end groceries. I saw the delivery trucks bringing new furniture, new props, new life. They were warm. They were happy. They were thriving in the sanctuary I had given them. And I was freezing in a metal box 200 feet away, invisible. The anger didn't come all at once. It built slowly, layer by frigid layer. It hardened in my chest like ice. I stopped crying. I stopped wondering what I had done wrong. I realized that my sacrifice hadn't bought their love. It had only bought their comfort. I was the fuel they burned to keep themselves warm. And as the rain hammered against the roof of my car, night after endless night, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to make sure they never, ever forgot what they had done. The tap on the window was relentless. Frank wasn't going away. I unlocked the car door, my fingers stiff with cold. When I stepped out, the rain soaked through my thin hoodie in seconds. I tried to stand up straight, tried to find some dignity, but it's hard to be dignified when you smell like desperation and your grandfather is looking at you like you're a ghost. Jasmine, he rasped, his voice barely audible over the rain. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. Why? Why are you here? I gave them the house, I whispered, my voice cracking. They said Olivia needed it. For her career. Frank stared at me, then looked past my shoulder at the Victorian cottage. The lights were on. We could see silhouettes moving inside. Wait here, he ordered. Grandpa, no, I started, but he was already moving. He marched toward the house with a terrifying, silent fury. I scrambled to follow him, my heart pounding in my throat. He didn't knock. He used the spare key he had kept, the one I had forgotten about. The door swung open, revealing the warm, scented hallway I remembered. But something was wrong. The air didn't smell like lavender and old wood anymore. It smelled like chemicals and construction dust. We walked into the living room. My parents and Olivia were there, frozen in shock. Olivia was holding a ring light. My mother was adjusting a vase. Dad? My mother gasped. What are you doing here? Frank ignored her. He walked straight through the living room to the back of the house, toward the French doors that led to the garden. I followed, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. He threw the doors open, and then he stopped. I stepped up beside him and gasped. The beautiful, overgrown garden I had loved was gone. The ancient rose bushes were ripped out. The stone path was replaced with white gravel. But the real horror was the greenhouse. My grandmother's greenhouse, the glass sanctuary where she had taught me to propagate orchids, the place that was the heart of the property, was gutted. The vintage glass panes were shattered in a pile in the corner. The iron frame had been painted a garish, trendy pink. Inside, there were no plants, just a platform, a hot tub, and a neon sign that read VBS. They hadn't just stolen the house. They had desecrated it. You destroyed it, Frank whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Olivia stepped onto the porch, looking annoyed rather than ashamed. Grandpa, don't be dramatic. It was old and dangerous. We're turning it into a content studio. It's going to be amazing for my engagement metrics. Frank turned slowly to face them. His face was gray. The vein in his temple was throbbing. You gutted your grandmother's legacy, he said, his voice trembling with a rage so deep it was almost quiet. For metrics? It's an improvement, my father insisted, stepping forward. It adds value. Frank looked at me. He saw the tears streaming down my face as I stared at the ruin of the greenhouse. He saw the mold on my clothes. He saw the exhaustion in my eyes. The sadness in his face vanished, replaced by something I had never seen before. Absolute, scorched earth resolve. Get out, he said. What? Olivia laughed nervously. Get out, Frank roared, his voice shaking the walls. All of you. Now. Frank's command hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a second, no one moved. My parents looked at him with wide, disbelieving eyes, as if the concept of consequences was a foreign language they couldn't translate. Dad! My mother started, her voice shrill with panic. You can't be serious. We live here. Not anymore, Frank said. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. You can't do that! Olivia shrieked, dropping the ring light. It clattered against the floor. This is my house! You gave it to us! I gave it to Jasmine, Frank corrected, his voice cutting through her hysteria. And just in case you forgot, my name is still on the title alongside hers. Yours isn't anywhere on this paper. He held it up, the legal proof of their theft. We have rights! My father shouted, stepping toward Frank aggressively. Squatters' rights. Family rights. You can't just throw us out on the street. Watch me, Frank said. He didn't flinch. He dialed 911, his eyes never leaving my father's face. Yes. I need an officer at 42 Maple Street. I have intruders on my property who are refusing to leave. Yes. I'm the owner. The next 20 minutes were a blur of screaming and frantic packing. My mother ran around grabbing vases and throw pillows. Olivia was crying, not out of remorse, but out of fury, shoving her expensive camera equipment into tote bags. My father paced the hallway, muttering threats about lawyers and lawsuits. I stood in the corner, still shivering, watching the empire of their entitlement crumble. When the police arrived, they were professional and swift. They reviewed the deed. They listened to Frank. They looked at the damage in the greenhouse. You need to vacate the premises, the officer told my father. Now. But we have nowhere to go, my mother wailed, clutching a silver candelabra like a lifeline. Frank stepped forward then. He looked at the daughter he had raised, the son-in-law he had tolerated, and the granddaughter he had spoiled. You aren't family, he said, his voice quiet and final. You're parasites. You took a gift I gave to Jasmine, a home she needed, and you turned it into a monument to your own vanity. You let her sleep in a car for 5 months while you sat in her living room. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The monthly allowance stops today. The credit cards are canceled. You're on your own. But Olivia started. Out, Frank said. I watched from the porch as they were escorted off the property. They looked ridiculous, clutching ring lights and designer bags, standing on the wet sidewalk in the rain. They looked small. As the police cruiser pulled away, leaving them stranded with their piles of stuff, Frank turned to me. The rage drained out of him, leaving him looking old and tired. "I'm sorry," he whispered, pulling me into a hug. "I should have protected you better." "You're here now," I said, burying my face in his coat. "That's all that matters." We went back inside. The house was a mess, filled with their clutter and the smell of their expensive candles. But as I locked the door behind us, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Silence. The noise of their demands, their guilt, their expectations, it was all gone. All that was left was the sound of the rain on the roof and the beating of my own heart. 6 months later, the garden was breathing again. It had taken every weekend and every spare dollar I had, but the greenhouse was restored. I had replaced the shattered glass with new, double-panned panels. I had stripped the garish pink paint from the iron frame and restored it to its original, deep forest green. Inside, the hot tub platform was gone, replaced by rows of potting benches filled with orchids, ferns, and the earthy, humid smell of life. I was sitting on the bench outside the greenhouse, drinking tea, when Frank's truck pulled into the driveway. He walked around the side of the house, moving a little slower than he used to, but with the same steady gaze. He stopped when he saw the greenhouse. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just reached out and touched the cool iron frame. "Your grandmother would have loved this," he said quietly. "I hope so," I replied. We sat together in the late afternoon sun. My life felt unrecognizable from the one I had 6 months ago. I had been promoted to senior landscape architect at my firm not because I asked for it, but because I finally stopped hiding my work. I had friends who came over for dinner, real friends who helped me sand floors and didn't ask for anything in return. My family, on the other hand, had collapsed. Without Frank's money, the facade had crumbled instantly. Olivia's brand imploded after she lost the studio space and the budget for her lifestyle. She was working retail now, living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates. My parents had downsized to a cramped condo, forced to sell their big house to pay off the debts they had accrued trying to maintain their image. They tried to call me sometimes, voicemails about family and forgiveness. I never listened to them. I just deleted them. "Have you heard from them?" Frank asked, taking a sip of his tea. "No," I lied. "And I don't care to." He nodded. "Good. You don't owe them your peace, Jasmine. You bought it. With interest." He looked at me then, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know, when I gave you this house, I thought I was giving you a place to hide. A safe harbor. I know. I was wrong," he said. I looked at the house, at the warm bricks and the restored stained glass. He was right. It wasn't just a building. It was the physical manifestation of my spine. It was proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I could take up space. When Frank left, the sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. I walked him to his truck and hugged him tight. "See you Sunday?" he asked. "Sunday," I promised. I walked back up the path to my front door. The air was crisp and smelled of rain and pine needles. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I turned the lock. Click. It was a small sound, a simple mechanical action, but in the quiet of my own home, it sounded like a victory march. I was safe. I was home. And for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't empty. It was full. If you believe that family is about respect, not just blood, please share this story. And tell me in the comments what's the one boundary you need to set today.